This year's NFL draft class is loaded with running back talent. It may actually be the best running back class we've ever seen, which is crazy. And at the NFL Combine, a few guys really stood out and increased their draft stocks even more. So in this video, we'll talk about the 5 running backs who impressed the most at the NFL Combine and are skyrocketing up draft boards. And let's start with a player that you guys probably know if you follow college football at all. It's Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State, a big branded school, right? You can see right here, he's a 21-year-old. He's 6 foot, 221 pounds, so a really nice running back build. And if you remember, in the college football playoffs against Notre Dame in the championship game, he goes out there, he averages 9.1 yards per carry, puts up 100 rushing yards, as you can see right here, 2 rushing touchdowns. Scroll down a little more, he wasn't done there. He got involved there as a receiver, 2 catches, 21 yards, and a touchdown. This is kind of the game for Quinshon Judkins. Throughout his entire college career of 3 seasons at 2 different programs, the dude, all he did was produce. And here's the proof of that right here. His first 2 seasons in college, you can see he played at Ole Miss before transferring to Ohio State for his final year in 2024 and winning a national championship. Pretty good strategy there by him. But in his first 2 years at Ole Miss, over 1,500 yards in his first year. He was the SEC Freshman of the Year, 17 touchdowns. He backs that up with another solid season, a little bit less efficient per carry, but almost 1,200 rushing yards. Both of these seasons, he's adding nice reception totals, 20 plus in his final 2 years. If you're in college football and you're hitting around 20 plus receptions, that is very good. And then in his final year, he transferred over to Ohio State and he had a solid year. We'll show you exactly the stats in a moment, but it's even more impressive when we consider he split the backfield with Trevion Henderson, another player who will probably be a second-round pick in the NFL draft this year. And despite splitting that backfield, he ends up going over 1,000 yards here. He averages over 5 yards per carry on the ground. He adds another 22 receptions, 121 receiving yards, and he showed up in the biggest moments. In the college football playoffs, in the college football championships, Judkins was showing up. Now, before we get into what he did at the NFL Combine, these are some of the high-level positives to his game. He has great size. He's a physical runner with great vision. And honestly, he has a lot of burst, especially for his size at 220 plus pounds that people don't consider. He had over 1,000 plus rushing yards and 1,200 plus total yards every year of his college career. So we know this guy could be productive. The questions just were around how athletic is he? And as you can see right here on Twitter from Dynasty Dad, which is a nice account to follow, you can see he points out that productiveness every single year, how many touchdowns, how many yards he has. But some people, like we just said, doubted the long speed and athleticism. Well, at the NFL Combine, here's what he did according to Player Profiler's workout metrics. He goes out there, he runs a 4.48 40 time. That's 81st percentile. His speed score, when you factor in his size, 91st percentile, meaning that he ranked in the top 10% of all running backs to ever attend the Combine in speed. And then his athleticism, his burst, which is just his jumps, his broad jump, his long jump, all these types of things here, you can see 94th percentile, borderline top 5% out of any running back ever to attend the Combine. So this is a guy who looked like a pretty clear 3rd round pick, maybe a 2nd round pick. Now he's locked in as a 2nd round pick. He won't go in the 1st round, but he's a locked in, surefire 2nd round pick. Because he went to a legit school, he faced tough Big Ten defenses and produced against them. And now some of the teams he could land on, I can see him on Pittsburgh. Najee Harris is set to hit free agency. Jaylen Warren's a restricted free agent, so he should be back, but I could see this being a 1-2 punch with Jaylen Warren and one Quinshon Judkins. If we go over to another team who could use him, I think it could be the Browns. I mean, right now, Nick Chubb is going to be a free agent. They said they basically aren't going to re-sign him, more or less, at the NFL Combine. The general manager and head coach were speaking. So what you have in this backfield is Deontay Foreman's also a free agent. It's basically just Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford's been a fine running back overall, but I think they're going to bring in competition one way or another. Instead of spending in free agency, which they still could do, I think they're going to draft a 2nd or 3rd round pick with one Quinshon Judkins. Now, in terms of some of the negatives, because of course we just said a lot of positives to his game, the reason why he's like not a 1st round pick overall is because there's some indecisiveness to his running, and in terms of pass protection for his size, it could be better. Overall, as you can see right here, the projected on mock draftable draft capital for Quinshon Judkins is a 3rd round pick. I think he'll go in the early 3rd, late 2nd, but as you can see, if you look at this board based on where he's been going, his value, the higher up is like kind of where he's been getting picked. So as he kind of ran that 40 time, you can see he started to creep into the 50s overall, which is the 2nd round in the 60s. The best he ended up getting mocked was 49th overall, which I think is still a possibility of being a mid-2nd rounder. So mid-2nd, early 3rd is kind of the range you can see him go. He helped his stock at the Combine. Now, maybe the player who helped his stock the most at the NFL Combine in terms of just where he's going to get drafted a couple rounds higher now, most likely, is Bashaw Tutin out of Virginia Tech. Look, you probably don't know who Tutin is. I barely did until I started in January looking at some of these RB prospects, but after the Combine, you might know about him now. If not, you're about to find out. Before we get into what he specifically did at the NFL Combine, this is a guy who started his career at North Carolina A&T, a small school, didn't do much in 2021 as a freshman, but in 2022, he breaks out. 208 carries, carries, over 1,300 total yards in this year. He's averaging nearly 7 yards per carry. Not only that, but then he adds 342 receiving yards, so nearly 1,700 total yards as a sophomore. He does that. He then transfers to another program in Virginia Tech. And at this program, against tougher competition, the production only continued here. On a smaller sample of 173 carries, he has 863 rushing yards. Okay, that's great. His final year, he gets a couple more carries, 183, goes for over 1,100 total yards in this season. He's looking good, averaging over 6 yards per carry, adds in a couple of receptions as well each year, 27 and 22, both very strong marks for a player like him. So all this is good, right? He ends up having solid production every single year of college, but we really had to see how much of an athlete he was to stand out amongst all the other great running backs in this draft class. Because if you just watch his tape and some of the things that I noticed from his tape, the positives, if you will, he has great acceleration. He could definitely hit top speed in just a few steps, but the biggest things were he's a reliable pass catcher and his home run hitting ability. His dynamic playmaking is absolutely off the charts, including in the open field. He's also pretty good at embracing contact, especially when it's lower on him. He just drives through his quads and his hips. He's pretty strong. Now, at the NFL Combine, this guy made an absolute name for himself. Maybe he would have gone in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round. Now he's probably going to be locked into being a 3rd, probably a 4th round pick. He runs the fastest 40-yard dash, a 4.32 40 time. His 10-yard split in the 40-yard dash, so getting out of his break, was 1st overall. His vertical jump was 1st overall. His broad jump was 2nd overall. This guy ranked, if we pull it up right now on Player Profiler, in the percentiles. His combine time, 100 percentile 40-yard dash, 98th percentile for his size, which is pretty damn good size, 5'9" and 206 pounds. He ranked in the 98th percentile, meaning he ranks in the top 2% of all time of running backs to enter the combine in speed score. Just to put this in perspective, he ran the exact same 40-yard dash time as Devon Achane, who everybody knows Devon Achane is super fast, right? But Achane did it at 188 pounds, Tutin did it at nearly 20 pounds heavier, and he's just as fast. This guy is extremely explosive. He's dynamic. If you look at his explosiveness specifically based on the jumps that he had, he has a 97th percentile burst score. That's his explosiveness, top 3% of all time. Everything looks good for this guy. If we pull up on Mock Draftable where he's going to get drafted, right now he's projected as a 5th round pick. Before the NFL Combine, probably a 6th, 7th, maybe he doesn't even get drafted in some mocks overall. If we look at how the Combine helped this guy, look at this. He was going right here, as you can see, as like a 212th overall pick at the early February. After the Combine, he goes all the way up to being a top 100 pick, settling in somewhere around the top 130. I mean, there's a world where a team like the 49ers, who loves fast running backs, they just drafted Isaac Correndo last year. They need to replace maybe Elijah Mitchell this offseason. McCaffrey's hurt. There's a world where they draft this guy in the 4th round. In terms of the negatives around Tutin, well, there's a couple of clear things. The biggest one by far is he has to improve his pass protection. He's shown a willingness, but he's just not there yet. And his ball security issues are a big deal. He's had 9 fumbles so far since joining Virginia Tech. Next up, I want to talk about a player who I believe is kind of getting overshadowed because of how good of a day Tutin had at the NFL Combine, but this guy was great. And it's DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. He's 6 foot, 212 pounds, so a great size for a running back. That's like an Aaron Jones, Tony Pollard type size. We love that off the bat overall. He spent 3 seasons at Kansas State, and in all those seasons, he was pretty impressive. First year, doesn't get a big workload competing with some other backs. 89 carries, though, he turns into 518 yards, which is very good on a per carry basis, averaging nearly 6 yards per carry. From there, it only gets better every season. Gets 200 plus carries his final 2 years, goes for over 1,200 rushing yards, over 1,300 rushing yards. Each of these seasons, he's averaging 5.5 and nearly 7 yards per carry, factoring in the receiving production, which is also great. 29 catches, 323 yards. 21 catches, 258 yards. This guy was producing every single year at numbers over 7 yards per touch or higher. And like I said, I think Tutin really just overshadowed some other players in this video we'll talk about, but especially DJ Giddens, who would have maybe been like the biggest winner if it wasn't for Tutin. Because as you can see right here, Ryan Heath, he's a nice Twitter follower. Be sure to check him out. He says that 6 running backs earned at least a 90th percentile spark score. So basically what you have to know about that is how athletic they were. 90th percentile, maybe you get 1 or 2 guys, 3 at most in most draft classes. There were 6 in this draft class. We already talked about some of them on this list. You have Tutin right here, who we talked about. We talked about Judkins, who was a surprise on this. And DJ Giddens ranks 3rd in athleticism in this class. DJ Giddens, who if you look at Tutin, he was the surprising guy who's overshadowing him. Amarion Hampton is arguably going to be a 1st round pick, a top 2 running back in this class in my opinion. Giddens is right there, up with those guys as number 3 overall on the list, but nobody's talking about him as much. And the nice thing about Giddens is not only does he have like this sleeker build, but also some muscle to him. 212 pounds is nothing to like laugh at by any means. He now has the athleticism, but it translates in his play style. Here's a nice example of this overall. Like Giddens is a 212 pound running back out of the backfield, taking this to the house. I mean, this is a spot where he's running by multiple defenders in open space out of the backfield with an angled route out of the backfield, takes it to the end zone for a touchdown, a long touchdown. That's a guy who's just striding. Like he's making it look seamless, running by multiple defenders who are going top speed, and he has to go at an angle and get up that acceleration. He has the size, he has the ability, and it comes through on his tape. For an easier look at his workout metrics, according to Player Profiler, 92nd percentile 40 time, 91st percentile speed score. That means top 10% of all time amongst running backs. And the burst score, his jumps, his abilities, his explosiveness, which we've seen on tape, but now we're seeing it in his athletic testing, 95th percentile, top 5% of all time. All of this stuff is fantastic. Now, the biggest question mark I had about him was his speed. Like, it shows up on film sometimes, but not always. But now that that's gone, I guess the biggest negative I can point to is pass protection could use some work. In terms of some spots where you can see him land, I could see him on the Chicago Bears. Like, they have two running backs right now there in DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson. Swift had a career high in touches last year with 295 overall, but a new coach coming in Ben Johnson, maybe he goes out and gets his guy in the running back class. And a team I mentioned earlier, but the 49ers, like, they have a lot of talent here. Isaac Rendo looked good in limited touches last year, but outside of Isaac Rendo right now on this roster, you have McCaffrey, who's coming back from an injury as well, and he's getting older. Maybe they add another back. It seems like every year the 49ers draft a mid-round running back. I think DJ Giddens could be this guy. I think Tootin could be this guy. Overall, Giddens is projected to be a 4th-round pick. I think that's probably right, but you can see how much the NFL Combine helped this guy. In early February, he was going around 159th overall. Okay, that's nowhere near like a 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. It's more so a 5th-round pick. Now he's been flirting with since the Combine. You can see right here, drafted close to being a top 100 player, flirting with the ability to go in the 3rd round. Wouldn't be shocked if he does. I think he goes by far, definitely by the 4th round. Now, this next running back made himself the most money at the NFL Combine, in my opinion, based on the fact that now I think he's going to be going as maybe a 1st-round pick. But before we get into that player, I have to let you know about the sponsor of the program today, and that is going to be Prize Picks. Prize Picks is a very simple format. You take the more or less on a player's statistic. Do you think they're going to go more or less than that? And you can win real money. I mean, here's some examples. You can already take some of these plays for the NFL 2025 season. Do you think Patrick Mahomes is going to throw for more or less than basically 4,000 yards, as you can see right here? Josh Allen, more or less than 3,750. You just combine these together. If you think they're both going to go over this, they're both going to stay healthy, continue to be great players, you can combine those together. You put like $10 on it. You can turn that into $30, $40, depending on the plays that you're looking at. Now, I've been partnered with Prize Picks basically since they started as a company for the past 4 to 5 years. I use them every single day myself as well, and you can use them with the QR code on the screen, and they'll give you a free $50 to play with when you use that QR code and you sign up with promo code SAL23. There's also a link in the description below. Just make sure you use code SAL23 when you sign up. Just take advantage of the free $50. Why not? If you're watching this right now, download the app, get the free $50, place it on whatever you want. You can do other sports, not just NFL as well, and then you can go on with your day if you don't want to play anymore. Take advantage of a free $50. Now, that player who I believe made the most money at the NFL Combine, because he's going to go from being a 2nd round to maybe a 1st-round pick now, which you get a lot more money for, that is going to be Amarion Hampton. He's 6 foot, 221 pounds, out of UNC, and oh my goodness, is this guy an absolute weapon. Like, if Ashton Genty, the running back who is one of the best prospects we've seen ever, like a top 5, top 10 prospect of all time, if he wasn't in this draft class, Hampton would easily be the #1 running back in my opinion, because he spent 3 seasons at North Carolina. His first year there was some more competition, so he only had 88 carries, but since then he's been the workhorse. In 2023, with Drake May as his quarterback, he goes for a workhorse usage, 250 plus carries, 1,500 rushing yards, but he's not done there. He adds 222 receiving yards, so over 1,700 total yards. Okay, but in 2024, he makes it even better without Drake May there, by the way, right? So now he has a different quarterback, a different system. He loses Drake May, a top 10, a 1st-round pick quarterback. He goes for 1,660 yards. They put the offense all on this guy's shoulder. He has 373 receiving yards. He's going for over 2,000 total yards. So we know he's a mega producer. I mean, this guy reminds me of like Joe Mixon, if you will, right? Even like Zach Charbonnet, who has been great when given opportunities in the NFL. Just a mega producer in college, but is he athletic? That was my biggest question coming into this. I thought he was based on film, but I didn't know for sure, because we know he has this size. We know he can break tackles, #2 in yards after contact, 73 broken tackles last year. He's good, as you can see right here, based on Scout D's analyzes his film, which I would agree with. Good pass catcher, vision, instincts, all of this is very sound. He compares him, before we have the NFL Combine results, to Josh Jacobs and Nick Chubb, which I think is very fair. Josh Jacobs, if you remember, didn't run the fastest 40 time, but is very good in the short area, quickness type area, and that's what you're seeing on film for Hampton. But oh man, then we got Hampton's testing, and as you can see right here on Player Profiler, it was great. 4.46 40 time is 94th percentile speed score, top 6% of all time for his size. 92nd percentile burst, so this guy has explosiveness. His jumping was fantastic at the Combine. And more specifically, if you look at Kent Lee right here, who makes he's Math Bomb on Twitter, he makes this thing called the RAF score, relative athletic score. He says that Hampton ranks 14th overall out of running backs out of over 1,900 to ever attend the Combine since 1987. So he's 14th in athleticism out of over 1,900 running backs. Yes, if Ashton Genty wasn't in this draft class, this guy, Hampton, who can produce mega production in college, and also now has this elite athletic profile, he would be the number one running back. He's going to be a first round pick in my opinion. As of right now, in mock draftable, they have him as an early second round pick, putting him as the 36th overall player, meaning he would be one of the first 5 players taken in the second round. The consensus believes that he will go to the Chargers. Oh my goodness. If he goes to the Chargers and they think that he's going to go to the Chargers as a first round pick, 22nd overall, I can easily see that. They're losing J.K. Dobbins. Why not go get a young, explosive guy? You want to build your team off of the run game if you're Jim Harbaugh behind a good offensive line. If Hampton goes to the Chargers, he's going to be a fantasy football dream pick come this summer. So Hampton is a very impressive running back who I love, a top 3, probably the clear-cut number 2 running back in this class. But this next guy is pretty sneaky, and he helped himself a ton at the NFL Combine. It's RJ Harvey, who I had as a top 10 running back in this class. That video, top 10 running backs for the draft class, will be releasing very soon, probably next week, so be sure to check back in. I had him as a top 10 running back in this class, but he was kind of on that borderline. Is he like number 13, 14, or closer to 8, 9, or 10? Now he's a clear-cut top 10 running back for me based on the NFL Combine results. We'll touch on those in a second. He measured in at 5'8", 205 pounds. Okay, so we know on film he looked a little bit smaller. There were some rumors he's playing around 190, 195 pounds. We know now that he has really good size, 205 pounds. And what we also know is that every single year in college, this guy was extremely productive. At UCF is where he played, right? In his first year there, doesn't get a big workload, 118 carries, 796 yards, but he's still efficient. His final 2 years, though, he proved he could be a workhorse. 226 carries, over 1,400 yards. Gets better every year with his final year, 232 carries, 1,500 total yards, almost 1,600 rushing yards, I should say. You factor in the total yards here with 267 receiving yards. He's also putting up nearly 2,000 yards in his final year, had mega production seasons his final 2 years of college. But the question was, how athletic is he? How big is he? The competition, of course, is always going to be a question at UCF, but he's checked off those first 2 boxes: the production, the size, and also he checked off the athleticism. Like, there were some questions, will he be like a Bucky Irving, who's maybe not the fastest guy, but he has some lateral quickness? Not at all. 4.4 40 time is one of the fastest at the NFL Combine. His burst being 89th percentile is extremely impressive as well. So he checks all the boxes as one of the better prospects we've seen, and I would say the last 2 to 3 years, when you put together both the production background, averaging like 1,700 total yards the last 2 years, and also the athletic testing. I like this tweet right here from Field Yates. He touches on how quick RJ Harvey is in this class, but he also says that he's special because of his physicality. He says the dude knows how to finish a run, and you can see that right here as the carry up the middle. He's a little bit patient. He finds the hole, breaks a tackle there, bouncing off defenders for a guy who's not 230 pounds. You can see it again right here. Finds the hole. He's quick to the hole, and he gets yards after contact. He probably gets an extra 10 to 12 yards after contact right there, which is impressive, especially because that was a run that was completely up the gut. He's not taking that to the outside and just getting some cheap yards after the line of scrimmage. In terms of the positives, outside of the ones we've already touched on for RJ Harvey, he has some of the best lateral quickness in this class, great lower body strength, as you saw in that clip. His vision is in patience, as you saw in that clip, is also good, and he's a proven pass catcher. Now, of course, there's a lot of positives here, but it's not like he's going to be a first or a second round pick, because there are some negatives. At times, he could always be looking for the big play, and he seems to be a liability in pass protection. Now, if we go back to this tweet from Ryan Heath from earlier, you can see the 6 running backs, and we talked about most of them in this video. RJ Harvey does make this list. He ranked 4th overall in athletic testing at the NFL Combine, top 5 overall here. You can see the other players we've talked about, 5 of them on this video right here: Tootin, Hampton, Giddens, Harvey, Junkins. Everybody we've talked about in this video was a top 6, one of 6 players to be above a 90th percentile SPARQ score, which just shows that they're a very elite athlete. Harvey was a player who, if he didn't have a good NFL Combine, based on his production, he probably still would have got drafted and his size, but who knows if it would have been a 6th or 7th round pick. He's currently projected to go right now in the 5th round, but some people after the NFL Combine are ranking him all the way up as the 97th player off the board, which is a borderline 3rd round pick. Again, based on the specific team, if they fall in love with this guy, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes in the 3rd or 4th round of the draft. So these have been the 5 running backs who helped themselves out the most in terms of rising up draft boards right now, making more money in the NFL draft because of what they did at the NFL Combine. We'll have the wide receiver version of this video out later this week. It'll pop up right here, and then next week we'll start to break down the top prospects at each position in the upcoming NFL draft. I appreciate you tuning in for this video. If you want to see all the other content that we have coming up, they'll be on the screen right now for the recent releases. Be sure to hit the subscribe button before you go, and I'll see you in the next one.